Okay, so all these questions are kind of similar, the ones that you submitted. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. They kind of build, and so it's kind of good to kind of start with this first one right here. And so what we're trying to do is we want to know what x equals. And currently we know what x to the power of 2/5 is equal to. And so to fix this, you could really do this in a single step, or you could do it in 2 steps. So in my notes in the video, I probably showed a raise to the reciprocal of this, which would be 5/2. But I'm going to go ahead and do this one in 2 steps, just so maybe that will help a little bit. So what I could do is I could raise both to the power of 5, right? And what that does is when you have power to a power, you multiply. So when you multiply 2/5 times 5, what happens here is the 5s are going to cancel out because you're multiplying 2 by 5 and you're dividing by 5. So what happens is we end up with x squared is equal to 4 to the power of 5, which is probably a pretty big number. Let me go ahead and grab my calculator, figure that part out. Okay, so 4 raised to the power of 5, which is 1024. And so then what I need to do next is square root it, but then there's a rule for that. If you're square rooting, you have to put a plus or minus right here. You have to look at it both ways. I can show you why in just a second while we do that. So then we get x equals plus or minus. And so I need to square root that value right there. So the square root of 1024, which is going to be 32. So that is my answer right there. There's 2 answers there, positive and negative 32. And the reason I have to put the plus and the minus sign is that when you square it, it doesn't matter if it was 32 times 32 or negative 32 times negative 32. You're going to end up with that 1024 right there. Okay, so that's fine, but really the fastest way to do this, though, and I kind of alluded to this at the beginning, is to raise both sides to the reciprocal, and it does kind of make the math a little bit easier to handle. So I'm going to raise both sides to 5/2, okay? And so then what happens here is, see, this will turn into x to the power of 10/10, or just basically x, just x, right? And then hopefully you remember from this that if you have a base raised to a power of m/n, the n is going to tell you the radical index. And then the m power can either go inside or outside. Typically, I'll put it on the outside, but you could put it on the inside with the base if you really want to. But for the most part, it's typically easier to put it on the outside. So that's what I'm going to do here. So I'm going to end up with the 2. So it's the square root. You don't have to put the 2 there, but I will just so we can see the connection. And then 4. And you could raise 4 to the power of 5 if you really want to. That's where you're going to get the 1024. But I'm going to go ahead and put it on the outside. Now, this is where students kind of have to struggle a little bit. Since I'm doing an even, I technically took the square root of both sides. That denominator of 2 right there is technically taking the square root of both sides. So I do have to put the plus minus on this, okay? Now, if that denominator was odd, I would not have to put the plus or minus. But since I'm taking an even root of both sides, the rule, if you look back at the notes, the rule is I have to put that plus or minus right there. Okay, so then x equals plus or minus the square root of 4, which is 2. Okay, and then we're going to raise 2 to the power of 5. Okay, and so 2 to the power of 5 would be 32. So plus or minus 32. Okay, so that's the first one. I'll go ahead and stop here and I'll make a video for the next one.